listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast with your host, Andy Plimer. Bringing you up-to-date coaching concepts from the world of rugby. Sharing ideas to make the game better.
G'day coaches. Well, it's out. Evolve Rugby, an online coach development course based on 100 plus interviews from this very podcast. Are you a club coach looking to continually develop? Do you want to increase numbers to training, be more adaptable, be able to coach to a variety of skill levels, and save time? Then check out the link in the show notes for a sneak peek of the Evolve Rugby online coach development course. Also, sign up to the newsletter so you can receive the latest offers. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, but for now, kick back and enjoy the episode. All right, welcome to episode 109 of the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. I'm your host, Andy Plimer, and joining me today is Jason Gilmore. Jason is the head coach of Australia A and assistant coach at the Waratahs. From 2017 to 2020, Jason was coaching with the Australian U20 team, and in 2019 led a great group of players to the final against France. He'll lead the Waratahs defence in the upcoming Super Rugby season, and it's a pleasure to have him on the show. So welcome, Jason.
Thanks, mate. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, no worries. Great to have you on. And we were just chatting off air there about growing up on the Gold Coast, and what were your first experiences as a player playing rugby and up in the Gold Coast?
It was all league back then because we didn't actually have any rugby clubs. So, mate grew up playing at Runaway Bay Rugby League Club and played that probably 6-7 years and didn't hit rugby until I actually went to high school.
Right.
So more of a leaguey kind of background and interest, and rugby got forced upon me a little bit. Went to a rugby only school in Brisbane and probably struggled with it for a couple of years and wanted to turf it in, and mum kind of kept pushing me to keep playing rugby, and eventually the game started to click a little bit more and kind of lit the fire probably about third year into playing it at high school. Yeah,
right. Awesome. And that would have been right, like when you were playing league, that would have been right around when the Broncos first started up, right? With Wally Lewis and some of the giants of the game.
Yeah. Had the Broncos, and growing up on the coast, we had the Gold Coast Giants come in as well in '88. Yeah. So we kind of had our own NRL team back then as well. But back then the Gold Coast was predominantly rugby league with a bit of AFL, but no rugby to speak of. So it's changed a bit since then.
Yeah, for the better, we'd argue. So yeah. What about some of those, first coaches, whether it be rugby or rugby league, that really had an impact on you that you can remember, and what were some of the things that they did that made the game feel special to you?
Yeah, probably the first coach that really had an impact on me was a guy called David Swanwick when I was at Churchie, and I was really struggling with rugby. He coached me in my second year at Churchie, and back then leagueies, like I played a bit of rep league and all that type of stuff, and back then if you're a leaguey, you just kind of got banished to the back of the pile, and you kind of had to learn your own way on how to transition across. I was really struggling. I knew I could play, but I just couldn't get a break, and was in the lower teams. And Dave was a prefect at the school at the time. And the best thing about Swanee was he just set a real strong standard for us, even though we're in the lower teams. Just his expectation around how he trained us and how he played. He didn't treat us like a bottom team. He treated us like a top team. And
that's awesome.
And we just loved it because all of a sudden we had a coach that cared for us at that level. He set really good standards and you didn't want to let him down. And I reckon if it wasn't for him in that year, I probably would have definitely quit rugby and gone back to league. Tactically, he was sound. I wouldn't say Swanee was a great coach tactically, but just the standards that he set for us and how much he cared for us was a really big thing. And I became really good mates with him post-school and worked with him in the boarding house at the same school when I was going through university. So we became really good friends off that. So it was probably the first coach I reckon that really had an impact on me.
Yeah.
leaving school, I went to East Rugby Union, and my Colts coach there was a guy called Gary Jessamine. Um, and same thing as Swanee, he just had a genuine care and again believed in you, like you felt 10 foot tall because you had Gary in your corner, and he'd always challenge you, but he generally wanted the boys to do well. But a little bit different to Swanee. He tactically was a really left field type of thinker. Like he wasn't bound by tradition and what's always done is what we do.
Nice.
Like he really challenged playing positions and styles of play and that type of stuff. And he really opened up my eyes to playing outside of the norm a little bit and just kind of expanding your horizons, I suppose, on the game and you're thinking on the game. He was the first one that really brought that to my attention. And then bring it together when I went from Colts into seniors, I got coached by a guy called Johnny Bremner, who was just a great educator. He was a teacher at one of the colleges in Brisbane, just so good at getting his message across, but he was a genuine ahead of his time with his thinking on the game. So I reckon he was a combination between probably Dave and Gary, but I think between those three in my rugby career early, really, I don't know. I look back now, it's funny with that question in my own coaching, what I kind of value. And, that was probably the bedrock of how I first saw coaching being done across those three guys, all different in their own way, but had a super impact on me from a young age.
Yeah, and that's a pretty awesome springboard for you going into coaching as well. That's the role models that you've had, and that comes up all the time. Just like not really the tactical stuff, but the care and the genuine kind of inclination to want you to do well as a player. So if you can,
Yeah.
do that as a coach yourself, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, I was probably lucky at East. As I kept flowing through the grades there, look, I had Adrian Thompson, who's now with Rugby Australia. Tom, I coached Super Rugby at the Reds, and he coached Australia A. He's a real mentor for me with my coaching still to this day. Tony McGann, who I played with, and then he turned around and coached us at East. I dumped one Heineken Cup with Munster, and obviously he coached the Rebels and was with the Wallabies and all that type of thing. And they're still guys to this day that I'll keep in contact with my own coaching. So it's funny how kind of coming out of East, predominantly my coaches there are the ones that, they've coached themselves, obviously, but guys that, still kind of guide me now.
Yeah. And what were those first experiences like when you decided that, coaching might be something you're going to explore? What were some of the things that you fell in love with, and what were some of the things that are a bit maybe cringeworthy looking back on it?
Yeah, there's a couple of them.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. I loved getting people better. I loved seeing them satisfied with where they were going to. I loved coaching players that thought they couldn't do something. Can you put a bit of belief and care and a bit of guidance into them, and then they can achieve it, and just their self-worth and self-confidence goes through the roof. And I studied phys ed teaching at uni. I had a brother that's a little bit younger than me, so I always bounced around his cricket teams and rugby teams and helped out when I was a young bloke. And I just loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved bringing a team together for a common goal, getting individuals better. So I got that from a really young age, and I think that's probably where the physical education aspect or want came into it. And then when I went through university, I actually worked as a boarding tutor at my high school in Brisbane at Churchy there. And a part of that, you had to actually coach some teams. So I got thrown in the deep end. I think I had the 14G cricket team. And,
there we go.
20 overs, you were lucky to get one ball end on the pitch. And I coached the third 15 rugby team. So you filled that full of boarders, and you just had a great time with it. So I just loved everything about it. And then playing wise, I went through the grades at East there, but wasn't good enough to make the next step. And I suppose coaching really started to take over post-university. I became a development officer at Queensland Rugby and kind of made my way through the coach ed system and into high performance there. But I think the big driver that gets me out of bed and wanting to get on the pitch is just helping young blokes achieve their goals and seeing their satisfaction when they actually get it is a big driver for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm a phys ed teacher as well, and you're talking about the 14 Gs at Churchy. I teach Canadian college kids how to play cricket, so I understand the getting a good line and length is a rarity,
Yeah, yeah, mate.
but it's a good
We
laugh.
had to put the Mate, we had to put the stumps in, but they weren't any chance of getting knocked over. So I reckon we got to left them behind.
Awesome, awesome. And what about that? You touched a little bit on the kind of pathway in the high performance. What did that look like in more detail to find you in the Australian U20 role? What were kind of some of the big jumps and big steps that you took there, and maybe some of the big learnings out of that process?
Yeah, probably the biggest one was patience. Like I don't come from
Mm,
a 100 Wallaby Test career or Queensland Reds or anything like that. So
mm,
I always had to really earn the steps that I achieved in coaching. So I had to learn patience from a really early age with my coaching. That I just made sure that I had to tick the boxes, but I was no different to a player. So yeah, coached bottom age school teams when I was a boarding tutor. When I became a development officer, I just started to get into the junior club representative teams.
mm,
Um, Moved into looking after the Reds Academy with the juniors. So through that, you start doing the Queensland under-16s and schoolboys level,
yeah.
ticking the boxes there, getting exposure with Queensland 19s and Queensland A. But once I finished playing, I actually captain coach reserve grade in my last year. And then I jumped in at the same club and took over as head coach of the Colts program there with the under 19s. And
Right.
that gave me a really good grounding, like to coach a bunch of blokes for 20 rounds,
Mm,
September through to September with no resources, managing
yeah.
staff that are voluntary. Mate, that's where you really cut your teeth as a coach.
Agreed.
And then from Colts, it was actually Dan McKellar, who's the Wallabies forwards coach. He was
Mm,
coaching at South, and he gave me a call to come across and coach with him. So I did first grade at South Rugby in Brisbane as well. So I kind of stepped through the school and the club pathway. And then I got the tap on the shoulder to head up the Reds Academy program, where I head coached Queensland Country in the NRC as well. So then you're starting to, get towards the pointy end, and
mm,
we had some good success with the Reds under 20s. We won the Super program there, and then an opportunity came up to coach Super Rugby with the Reds, which I did. And then the next step was doing the Junior Wallabies. So it's probably a little bit boring, but started junior clubs, schoolboy level,
mm.
moving into Colts football into first grade, stepping into the Reds Academy, and then up into Super Rugby. So I suppose my trajectory was steady, but I had to jump up on every step. I couldn't skip steps.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's where that patience and resilience with my coaching and just sticking to the task was really important.
Oh yeah, and I think also like longevity wise, it'll help in that regards too, because you often see those ex-professional players getting dropped into the club that they were once playing for, and sometimes they'll last a couple of years and then move on. And I think like battling away with a Colts team for a calendar year, it's tough graft, and you can't read that in a book or at a conference. Experiential learning is really important in that part.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think if you look at a guy like Benny Mowen, who captained the Wallabies, I played with Benny at East and
Hmm.
know him really well. He's wanting to forge ahead with his coaching, but the best thing Benny's done is he's head coaching East first grade for a couple of years. And,
Yeah.
Benny's got all the experience. He's been in the fire, he knows the environment, he knows footy back to front, but just planning a season and looking
Mm.
after resources, recruiting staff, and keeping players motivated. They're all the little things that you don't have too much experience in until you actually get into the seat. So yeah, club footy for me was huge, absolutely huge in my
Yeah.
development.
Yeah. No, awesome. All right. Well, yeah, and ended up getting you into the Aussie U20s setup. What was that experience like? And especially that 2019 group, they were really fun to watch. I think you took them. You talk about building a team. You took them to the Snowy Mountains beforehand, before the tournament in Argentina and things like that. What was that like? Kind of 4 year stint like heading up the U20s?
Yeah, it was probably the opposite to club footy. Like actually, then you probably went from minimal resources to not whatever you wanted, but you had
Mm.
really good resources to build the program that you wanted.
Yeah.
In terms of the program itself, it was unreal. Like, it was a real step up. You had to,
Mm.
obviously get to a World Cup, and because it was a national team, there was expectation on performance, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, obviously how you operated a bigger staff group. You kind of went from a staff group of 4 or 5 at club footy to 13 or 14 staff underneath you.
Mm.
Short-term program, like, you didn't have the luxury of a 3-month pre-season. You're in and out of camps really quickly. So in terms of the accuracy of what you coached in those camps was important. So the experience itself was a real step up. Probably the thing that I learned, hence the Snowy Mountains, was I'd been in and around the 20s a little bit. I was an assistant coach in 2010 when we made the final under Dave Nusafora.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I was assistant coach in 2016 under Tomo, and then I took over in 2018. Um, and it was always the trick, like, because you had smaller time, you thought you had to jam a lot of footy in there and make sure that you got your footy content done.
Mm.
Um, and I don't reckon we gave the boys the best experience with it. And that's where we turned around in 2019, and we're like, we're not hitting the mark. We're close, but we're just not quite getting these boys ready for a World Cup. And
Mm.
we had a look at the connection of the players was the biggest thing that we looked at, both on and off the field in terms of combination, but also getting to know each other. So the Snowy Mountains one came around because we'd always train at the OIS, and we actually wanted to get away and not talk footy and not take a football with us. So we actually chewed up about 3 or 4 days out of the camp, not doing football.
Mm.
And I reckon in hindsight, it's the best thing that we ever did.
Awesome.
So we teamed up with a guy called Matty Trippett, who runs a fly program, and it's all around men's mental health.
Right.
And we designed a program, not that it was going to be school campish. I was really worried it was going to be cliched and
Mm.
just activities that the boys would just look at and go, it's a bit bullshit. I'm not sure I want to be a part of that. But
Mm.
he facilitated an excellent camp. We climbed through rivers and would stop off every now and again and get to know each other. And it's quite confronting. You're actually standing with a bloke you've never known, and you're talking about what's your
It's
philosophy,
awesome.
like, what are your values as a bloke. And even for
Mm.
me as an older guy, like, you kind of know your values, but to actually express it to a stranger,
Mm.
it made you pretty vulnerable. So just little things like that brought us closer. And
That's great.
we did a heap of team bonding experience in and around it. We took Stephen Larkham and a few of the older boys with us. So we had some
Mm.
footy legends just to sit around the campfire and just talk footy and have a drink together and just
Yeah.
get to know each other. So it really relaxed the group, but I reckon it really propelled us with the boys getting to know each other and what we actually valued as a group. So I reckon previously I'd probably always done that team culture stuff where you're sitting down in the classroom and what do you value and what are your 3
Mm.
trademarks. Completely gone away from that, I think, until you've actually spent time together and you know how guys react under pressure or out on the drink, or what they're like off the field or how they prepare. It's hard to actually manufacture your trademarks until you actually get to know each other first, and then your actions dictate what your trademarks are. So we kind of flipped how we did our cultural piece in that 2019 period. And just build our game model as well. I reckon we got a lot craftier and a lot more accurate with our game model in 2019
Right.
than previous years, in terms of how we prepared the boys and where we put value on it. So when we put all of that together in 2019, we had a good group of guys, don't get me wrong, but
Mm.
I thought how we put the program together was probably the best that I'd been involved in.
Right. Yeah. And that probably leads me to that next question and around the game model. As a fan watching, I noticed a real big change in terms of, and this is something I'd love to see more of in Aussie rugby, is just a real concerted effort to keep the ball alive, to get behind the defender and to look to offload first rather than a breakdown. And that really jumped out at me with that U20 team. What's your philosophy around offloading, keeping the ball around alive, and how did you kind of build that into that team?
Yeah, well, the first one was in a short-term program. I guarantee you, most of the time is spent on your attack shape, getting it all
Mm.
together because there's so many moving parts and combination and timings. But what ends up happening, we had this in 2018 a little bit, was you spend so much time on it, you actually expect it to go really well. But when you put
Mm.
it under the furnace at World Cup footy, the first thing to go is your timing and your clunkiness of your attack. And then the boys get a lot of anxiety around performance then because the attack's not working, but that's where you spent most of your time on. So again, we flipped it. We put our defence up front because defence has moving parts, but it's based on attitude and, defending for the bloke beside you, which was going to be important for us. And we knew we had the style of player that would really get off on that. So we went really hard at getting our defence sorted. Getting our set piece right, so scrum and line out was crucial for us, both sides of the ball. And then the only thing we put emphasis on with our attack was our exit plays. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't put ourselves under any pressure turning the ball over in our back 30. So we made sure we're really sharp with our exits. But in terms of the actual general play shape, Shannon Fraser, who was our attack coach, I worked with Fraser here at the Waratahs. Now, he did a great job in terms of our patterning and our play, but we just took the shackles off our attack. So if we didn't talk about it so much, it didn't mean it wasn't important or we didn't spend time on it, but we knew if we put our defence up front, we got our set piece right and we exited pressure, the rest of it would just start to flow with our attack because we had good footy players. Yeah. And then in terms of keeping the ball alive, we changed up training a little bit where we brought in the rule of two. So rather than just a tag or a body in front where the ball carried hit the deck and straight away you get a ruck, which is probably what most trainings like, is the rule of two was if you got to the side of a defender at training, you could punch through, run 2 metres. You had 2 seconds to offload, but your offload had to be less than 2 metres. So you couldn't run through a tag and then throw a 10-metre tap pass. So what that then promoted was the ball carrier actually using footwork to get to an edge of a defender. Burst through, but then we worked really hard on our primary support, and our lateral support was flooding through that same channel because he knew that he had 2 seconds to get to him, but he had to be within 2 metres, so then you're flooding through him behind the ball carrier. And then just little things like, I think it was if we're playing numbers 10 and below, so say if you're doing a 4v3 drill and warm-up and you drop the ball, it's normally right, restart again. We'd actually play that out one phase. So if I was playing you and I dropped it and you picked it up, you had one phase then to attack against me.
Awesome.
And it was just play. Like if you made an error, it didn't matter, but it was about your reaction to the ball to pick it up and go. And then if it was 10 or above, because you had bigger numbers for breakdown, then we played 3 phases. So what then that meant for me and Fraser as coaches is if I'm doing a defence drill, but we defend it really well, but we're generating turnover in a 15-minute defence drill, it might end up that my boys actually have 5 minutes of turnover attack. But then I'd get that back when Fraser's running his attack drill because we might turn his ball over, so all of a sudden he's getting 5 minutes of defence. But then we started playing this real transition-y style of training where it was just play, bring the rule of two on top of it, and it just generated some really good footy. So we knew we had good football players, but again, just taking the anxiety out of everything being neat and perfect in attack all the time, but actually play, really press hard on that turnover ball, something that we try to push into the boys.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it's great for coaches to hear that too, because that's where the bulk of tries are scored, from turnover ball and kick return included there, and then plays off lineouts. So that's some good messages there for coaches for sure. And you had 3, like maybe 4 genuine ball players as well in that group as well. Like it's really 3 fly halves that were just playing all over the park. It was great footy to watch for sure.
Yeah, and we just had a bit of detail around it too. We obviously had, Willie Harrison was our 5'8". We had Noah Alessio at 12, and we put Isaac Lucas back to fullback. Like within our shape, Isaac was our controller on the short side. So as soon as we'd open up the short side, we'd use his ball playing back down the short sides, and we created a fair few tries from it. So it's just getting the right blokes in the right place of the field, but actually playing footy as well.
Awesome. Well, jumping on to Aussie A team, I think it's awesome that program is happening again, and like it's happening big time this time around. What was that trip to Japan like? 2 wins, 1 really close loss. Bunch of guys getting international time, and so a couple of them pushed into the Wallabies for the recent the most recent tour over into Europe. How's that experience like?
Yeah, excellent. I think I was saying to you off air before, like for a lot of these young boys with COVID, they actually haven't toured for 3 years. Like we've jumped
Mm,
across to New Zealand a little bit with Super Rugby, but international travel's pretty much been parked. So for a lot of the boys, it was their first proper rugby tour. So, on field it was great, but off field, the boys had an absolute ball, which was good. And
wicked.
I think we're lucky in Japan because we'd been together in Fiji with the Pacific Nations Cup,
Mm,
because you've got such short turnaround time. Like you literally only got one training session at speed leading into the first game on those
mm,
tours. Um, Japan was a little bit different because we had a lot of the Wallaby boys come back. Dave Rennie released, Caden Neville and Frosty, who played the Bledisloe
mm.
the week leading into that first game. So it was a bit of a mixed squad, which was really nice. We had a fair few experienced guys coming in. Um, but same thing, I reckon, with that group, because we had the Wallabies, we had the guys coming in from Fiji that have been with us, a couple of new guys, a couple of young kids coming in. And it's more just about how you connect them and make them feel good and understand their details so they can actually play good footy. Because Japan put out a cracking side. Like
Yeah, no doubt.
the only bloke that didn't play the All Blacks game on the weekend was the 5'8". So they were there to play. Like they
Mm,
rolled that team out 3 times in a row. So it was good hard footy, but geez, you wouldn't get a better place. Dry decks, big crowds, fast
yeah,
footy. The boys had a ball with it.
yeah. And any stress around North Korea during that time? Did you have to manage that as a coach in any way, or was that like kept
Uh,
they
we,
were pretty chilled
uh,
about it?
yeah, like I think one day we heard that there was a missile go off or something like that. But yeah, we're pretty cruisy. I think we had a bit of an earthquake in Tokyo that swung the hotel around a little bit, but
Yeah,
we're all
boys
good.
are all chilled.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
sweet. All right, well, Waratahs, you're probably a week away from preseason. What's that like? You're heading up the defense there. How are you going to go about like building a defense with a team throughout preseason and like early season? How do you work the balance between kind of individual tackle technique and overall shape of your team? How do you roll that out over a 6 to 8 week process?
Yeah, we'll do. We changed how we trained a little bit last year, which we got good results in. Rather than just block or contact in or 1 or 2 days, we just
Mm,
went a little bit often. So every day we'll do an element of contact.
right,
So whether that's just light contact tech on the wrestle mats in the gym indoors to then bone on bone out on field. But we'd always do some form of wrestle or contact every day.
right.
And it's something that we needed. Like before you even get in a shaping system, if you're losing your contact point, it doesn't matter how
Mm,
good your system is. Yeah,
yeah.
you're going to be up against fast ball, and you're not going to get time to get your line org sorted and
Mm,
get the ball back. So contacts are really, that's the key for us. If we can get our contacts sorted, then the shape will look after itself.
mm,
And then how we break it down is I just then go by the big rocks, like what are the things that you do the most in defence, and that's where we allocate the most time to. So contact is one, multi-phase shape is obviously really crucial. You spend most of your time in multi-phase. Turnover balls over 50% of the game now, so
yeah.
our kick chase and our turnover defence is crucial. So we'll do that at least 3 times a week. And then in terms of your set piece work, like your line out and scrum, they're the things that we do last because it's probably the easiest because you're coming from a
Yeah.
set position and you've got
Mm,
to spend time on your folding roles and who's going where and how do you defend return patterns and all that type of thing. But if we can get our contact, our multi-phase, our transition defence sorted, then the structure will come a little bit later.
mm,
And the other tricky one with us is with the spring tour, the Wallaby boys aren't back with us until after Christmas. So we'll do a
yeah.
6 week block for Christmas. But, we've got Parisi, Harry Johnson Holmes, Lachlan Swinton.
Lucky
Like we got
Swinton. Yeah.
some big guns that are in the rehab room that won't train with
Mm,
us until post Christmas as well. So it's always a tricky one because you get your pre Christmas group up to a certain level, but ultimately you've probably got 80% of your team that's going to start round one, come back post Christmas where you've got to start it all
mm,
again. So
yeah.
that's where we're going to keep some pretty similar philosophies to last year. So when they come back in, they know what we're doing. But we've identified 2 or 3 areas that we got to make sure that we're best in comp on, so we can have a crack at winning it.
Yeah, yeah. And what about when you're talking about shape and kick counter and or kick chase, those kind of things? How are you coaching that? Are you doing mostly, games, small sided games in that regards, or are you doing like breaking it up into some drills and then, a whole part whole kind of games, drill games kind of setup?
Yeah, early on we'll block it. So like we'll even do stuff like how we attack that breakdown that they're going to be exit kicking off, for instance, how we kick pressure. So you can do all of those in just micro groups. You can do them in pairs. You can do them in smaller groups, but then you start
Mm-hmm.
to put it together. So it might be how you kick chase off a box kick versus a long kick into a corner, because they're two
Mm-hmm.
completely different kick chase philosophies. But you can really break it down into small groups. So we've got a 6-week preseason. We won't do full 15 on 15 until the back end of week 3. So the first 3
Right.
weeks is just all smaller group work. Then we'll put that into 15 on 15. So it'll kind of be block train from smaller groups into 15 on 15. And then once they get the hang of the principles, then we'll randomise training. So that's where we can go
Right.
from box kick, short grubber, crossfield kick, might be a long kick into a corner, and then you start building that year conditioning games.
Right.
And there's probably two types of, for instance, kick chase. There's one off a structured exit where you might be on your try line, you've got a 5-man line out where you can set up your kick chase line versus your 40 metres out and your 5'8" just decides he's going to kick it, and you're going from an unstructured position to then building your kick chase line. So there's two different styles of kick chase that probably require a little bit more detail on.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and then last question on that. What about any like new law variations or focuses from the referees that you feel for defense that you're gonna have to be aware of and that you can potentially get some tactical advantage out of?
Yeah, they're also looking at how they can speed the game up.
Mm,
How they do that, I'm not too sure. They're talking about speeding up to 5-second rucks. And the big one with that is these days with the box kick, like you see teams now, they probably take 10 seconds and they drop 3 guys back in a caterpillar and you can't
yeah.
actually get to it. So they're trying to get away from that. So in terms of
Mm,
disrupting box kick breakdown and getting kick pressure on, hopefully you get a bit more opportunity to get stuck into the kicking game of opposition
mm,
teams. I think the biggest one is just the cards. It's rare. I said in the media, I think after the Reds game this year, it's rare to get through a game now with 15
it
men on
is.
the
It's
field for
crazy,
8
eh?
minutes.
Yeah.
So how you equip yourself at training, like with 14 men, 13 men, if you lose your
Mm,
halfback, who's defending where, like I think that's probably
yeah.
the thing at the moment with your scenarios,
Right.
with cards. I know from a defensive point of view, that's probably the thing that doesn't worry me. But if we don't spend time at training defending with 14
Mm,
or 13, you might lose a loose head at a scrum because it's repeated collapse. And then all of a sudden you've got your back rower off. Like, how are you defending that
yeah.
then from a scrum? Because you're losing one bloke off your fold, and just all of those little things
Yeah.
in and around the cards is a big one.
Yeah.
Um,
And that
and I
was
think just
also
the
a big thing in the U20s in 2019, right? The cards were huge in that tour.
Yeah, and we got really lucky. When we got to Narrabeen, which is our pre-World Cup camp, so we'd
Mm,
finished Oceania, won that. There's a couple of little cards floating around, but we got the official thing through that they're going to go really high on head-high contact, and
mm,
we actually just spent 2 days doing scenario games. We split them into 2 teams, and
yeah,
and we went really hard at repeating them across the 2 days. But right, you've been carded here, penalty. This is the score. This is the situation. And it really helped us because we lost England. We lost Paddy Taufer after a minute,
that's right.
red
Yeah,
card. Got to the semi-final against Argentina. Our halfback, Michael McDonald, got 10 minutes. Unluckily, a guy jumped into the tackle and he got done for lifting. And then he saved a try in half time, but his trail arm made contact with the guy's head and he got a second yellow. So he actually got red carded at half time.
yeah,
So we played 40 minutes in the second half, obviously down to 14 men, and Argentina didn't score a point against us in the second half, and
that's
we closed
awesome.
it out
Yeah,
really well. Mate, I don't reckon if we had done those scenarios for a couple of days,
mm,
I reckon it would have freaked the boys out a bit.
mm,
And the other one's just the high collision, like they're just going so hard with protecting the head,
Mm,
how you get your heights on entry into the tackle, and your clean out is something that we're pretty pedantic on here. Is just making
mm.
sure that we're not going anywhere near the head, particularly as the first point of contact. So around that contact work, what you're doing there is pretty crucial these days.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, it's good to hear, and can't wait to. It's a bit of time before the season kicks off, but it's always exciting when a new super season kicks off. So, pretty keen to see how the Tars go. All right. Well, we always end the show with the same final four questions. I'm predicting potentially a rugby league player for this first one. When you were a kid growing up, who was your favourite player to watch playing footy?
Yeah, definitely be a leaguey because I wouldn't have known any rugby guys. Boys always give me grief, but favourite player was Terry Lamb, who played
Oh,
the
yes, me
Canterbury
too.
Bulldogs. Yeah, love Bar, so he was out and out my favourite.
Oh, he was an
Uh,
animal. Yeah.
yeah, and probably my second one was Wayne Pearce. I just
Oh,
loved
yeah. Yeah.
just
T-
how tenacious, and as a defender, he was just a beast. He wasn't the
Yeah.
biggest bloke, but
Yeah.
he just topped the tackle counts every week. He was unreal.
That late 80s kind of era was just some amazing rugby league players from, Canterbury, Balmain, and Parramatta, like
Yeah,
just and Manly as well. Like just yeah, awesome. Love it. Big fan of Terry Lamb. What about
yeah.
now? Who are some of the players you like to watch now?
Um, that's a good question. Probably, I love guys that compete hard. So,
Mm,
I've probably because I'm close with him here at the Waratahs, but a guy like Lockie Swinton,
mm,
you just know what you're going to get with him when he goes out in the
yeah.
field. He's
Mm,
just gives his all in everything. He's physical. He's competitive. He probably pushes the edge a little bit, but he's just one of those blokes that the opposition just look out for in the defensive line. I really like those guys that have a presence about them on the footy field.
yeah, awesome. He's great to watch too. I like his style. Awesome. And question three: what about a high profile coach that you respect how they run their program and what they're doing?
Um, I don't know him well at all. I've done a couple of Zooms with him, and just from afar, but a guy like Wayne Smith,
Mm,
um, super impressive guy.
yeah.
Everyone talks about him highly. I worked with Thorny a little bit at the Reds there before I came down, and he obviously did a lot of work with Wayne Smith, and you just hear the stories about how he was. And Rob Penny, who was Waratahs coach a couple of years ago, Penn's knew Wayne really well from Canterbury, so he got all the coaches onto a Zoom with Wayne, and you could have talked to him for 4 hours, and it would have felt
Unreal.
like four
Yeah.
minutes. Just his knowledge and his willingness to share, and he's the guy that really impresses me.
No, he was. I had him on the pod for episode 100 actually, and I sent him the questions in advance, and he said, "Oh, I don't know if I'm going to have enough time for this, mate." And then at the end of it, it was I had to leave because I had another appointment because he just loves talking rugby, and it was amazing. It was such a great chat, and he's such a humble guy and so knowledgeable and so willing to share. So yeah,
Yeah,
echo the sentiments there for sure. All right, and final
yeah.
question: what about someone in the grassroots, coaching the grassroots who doesn't have the profile of Wayne Smith, but deserves a shout out nonetheless?
He's a guy I coached with at the Reds. He's back in club footy now, but a guy called Shane Arnold. So he did super at the Reds, but Shane owns his own business, and he had a chance to go back into super last year, but just through his business, he couldn't
Mm,
jump back in. So he's just been grafting at first grade at Jeeps up in Brisbane there, but he's one of the best attack coaches I've worked with, and you speak to anyone who's coached by him, and he's just one of those guys that builds a really good affinity with his players and his staff, and there's nowhere to go about him. He's happy coaching first grade there at Jeeps and doing a really good job, but I think he's a guy that he's definitely got the potential to go places. It's just probably been unfortunate with his work situation, hasn't
mm.
able to be able to do it.
Awesome. Oh, that's a good way to finish the show. And I like hearing stories like that. People who are just chipping away in the grassroots and keeping the game going because it's essentially a volunteer game, and we've
Yeah,
all been there and done it, and it's valuable work. All right, Jason. Well, it's been awesome chatting to you like I love that. Like I said in the interview, I love that U20 team. Really brought me a lot of joy to watch that style of rugby, and can't wait to see how the Waratahs are going. And stoked that the Aussie A teams are a fully fledged program now, and hopefully it's going to keep chipping away because it's essential for that development pathway. And it's been great chatting with you. I really appreciate you giving up your time.
All good. Thanks, Andy.
Cheers. Thanks, mate.
Thanks for listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review via iTunes and keep listening for the next episode. You can also follow us via Twitter at RugbyCoachesCNR or via the website therugbycoachescorner.com. Until next time, keep sharing ideas to make the game better.